So quite a lot of challenges that is being faced by new technology in order to actually address that issue on climate change, the energy security that we're facing now as a result of the Ukraine, and also that transition from using fossil-based fuel to actually a much cleaner fuel. And if I reflect back on that example on carbon engineering, it feels like all of these arrows are actually pulling one from one another, because there's always this challenge that if you try to actually start using much cleaner energy, then the cost will also go up. And we have experienced in Ukraine that the supply of fossil fuel was disrupted, and how energy security become a very important factor. But we know that to hit 1.5 C2, we started to need to think about that. I need to actually shift my thinking. I need to shift my energy usage to actually hit and contribute to climate change. And therefore, the thinking that I have is that instead of arrows pointing outwards, maybe the thinking should be arrows pointing inside. And actually thinking that all of these things, that climate change, energy security, and energy transition are one and together that can actually form a system. And let just me give you some examples that this thinking can be applied for. So what you're seeing here is solar panels. And if you look at it, solar energy is one of the most easily accessible type of renewable energy. It's been that solar panels prices are going down, and a lot of companies are starting to build one. I mean, quite a number is happening here in the Philippines, and Attorney Di Malanta pointed that one out earlier on. Now, the question with solar energy is that, especially for a country like the Philippines, is that it takes 1 hectare per megawatt of energy that you produce. So meaning you will have to eventually compete with farming and other usage of land if we want to rely on renewables such as solar energy. The second one on solar energy is that it's intermittent. So when there's no sun, there's no energy that can be produced. And with our system too in place, whenever there's a sun, that doesn't necessarily mean that our transmission system can actually transfer that energy from one place to another. And again, and I think the question really is, how do we actually time shift it? And then the last question is, by putting in solar energy, are we actually converting some of our farmlands into power plants that actually uses solar? Now, in Germany and in other places, what they've started thinking of is maybe they can actually cohabitate. I can continue to actually produce the energy that I need in using the solar panels, but at the same time can actually continue to produce produce that can be put on the table. And in fact, for some of the farmers, they said, look, the shade of the panels actually helped me grow my shrubs and my berries much better. And for me, if you go back to this example, this is where the arrow starts pointing in. Because putting in the solar panels, thinking about how to use the land more effectively and efficiently, actually contribute to both the security and the affordability of electricity. Now, as an opposite example, I want to share what's happening in the West Philippine Sea. I mean, in the reduction, I used to be part of Malampaya. Now, if you look on the news, there's always an issue whenever Malampaya is shutting down. And I mean, this February, there's in the news that Malampaya will have its regular maintenance for a couple of weeks. And immediately, people's thinking is electricity prices will go up. And then also this question, do we have enough gas to last in the future? But for me, the question is, are we actually optimizing enough what is really available in the West Philippine Sea? Now, the way we have looked on West Philippine Sea for the last decades is always look at it as postage stamps. So we have one small field development here and there. I mean, Malampaya itself is a single postage stamp. But if you look on the map, the service contract of the map of West Philippine Sea, there's a lot of overlap. And the thinking that we need to look into West Philippine Sea is that, can I actually use the whole of the West Philippine Sea and look at it instead of a postage stamp as a counterpane or a counter sheet of all postage stamps and develop it that way? The question will be, will it be affordable, and will there be investors to actually do it? And I think this is where the challenge across the business that we are all in. And that's really the challenge of how do we shift our mindset in terms of how do we do things? Because if we keep on thinking postage stamps, especially here in the Philippines, rather than a counter sheet of stamps, and really think about how can we actually have all of these systems to work together rather than compete with one another, then we will continue to be not attractive to energy investment. We will not continue to have all those levels of people coming together to actually do something difficult. If you look at the example I gave at the start about carbon engineering, those are multi-billion-dollar investments. But a number of big companies are also investing on it because they believe that carbon management, carbon sequestration in a different way rather than pumping it under the earth could be actually a viable and an important part of our energy system in the future. And I think this is one of the messages I want to share here is that the Philippines, if you look at it, has quite a diverse source of energy, or have quite diverse sources of energy, from renewable down to geothermal, and down to also having fossil fuels like gas and diesel. I think we need to look at it in a more systemic basis rather than trying to say one is not is against one another, but look at it on the needs of our country, and also look into it whether our current tradition of using just a single grid system, as Dr. Attorney Dumalanta pointed out earlier, is still the valid. We also need to make sure that whilst there's a lot of competition with different companies in the energy business and in the overall Philippine environment, I think there are common points of interest where we all can collaborate, including doing some of the more difficult areas and difficult activities, such as working on really trying to mature the West Philippine Sea, or looking into how can we actually make the energy systems in the Philippines more robust. And I really hope by doing that, we can be more efficient. Efficient in such a way that rather than competing heavily, we're actually using some of the strengths of each of the organizations to actually maximize the system. We also start promoting really for our people at the very lowest level that, look, what we need to think about here in the Philippines too is not just about what individual organizations or companies can actually do, but collectively, how can we actually be efficient also in our energy usage? If you look at the learnings in the UK or in Europe during this Ukraine war, they were able to actually reduce their gas consumption by 20%, just driven because of the need to actually make them more efficient and more effective use of their gas. And I think this is something that we can all do together in the Philippines. So it's about really thinking more holistically, having a healthy combination and really collaborating, and really trying to drive one another to be efficient.